Welcome to the Buyer Negotiation Bootcamp. I love that you're here because what I found is that first-time home buyers or buyers that are new to South Florida are full of misconceptions about our real estate market. They've either heard things in the news or seen things on social media that never fully show the entire picture. And in a lot of cases, the data that they are sharing isn't actually accurate, and generally it's usually a few months behind at that. And so I always like to keep this workshop updated because real estate is cyclical. It's not always the same. And I just want to make sure that we're delivering the most accurate, up-to-date information that's also going to be relevant to our local market. Okay? So ultimately, the objective for today is to make sure that you are able to confidently and comfortably navigate this massive purchase that you're considering making and do it in a way that helps you build wealth. And we're going to make sure that you do create wealth by getting you the best deal possible that this market will allow. As a quick intro, my name is Janet Garcia. You know, I originally wanted to be a psychologist. And I think I've gotten pretty close to being a therapist with being a real estate agent and all. So I actually moved down here from Chicago back in 2014, and I started selling real estate in 2021, and it's been such a fulfilling journey of being in this beautiful place. And I'm super excited for South Florida because it's going to continue to evolve before our very eyes. You know, it's very fulfilling for me to be able to help people, and if I could help you by building your wealth through real estate, then the pleasure of meeting you is simply all mine. And I'm just glad we found each other, and now we can embark on this journey together. Some of my company's values are growth, legacy, family, and I think that really summarizes the experience we deliver to our clients. Really, my number one objective as a real estate agent is to help you build wealth so that you can create a legacy for your family. And we'll talk more throughout this presentation about exactly how we go and do that for you. So I wanted to start by telling you the story of my client, Sarah. And Sarah is a great case study for this because I find that a lot of people who are watching this workshop are either new to South Florida or they're new home buyers. They're new to the home buying process, and without the right preparation, oh my God, this process ends up being super overwhelming. Okay, so Sarah actually moved down here from Kansas City, Missouri, and she was new to the area, of course, and the first step with her was really helping her zero in on the area where we were going to be shopping in. Now, you'll find as we go through this process that I'm not the super pushy salesperson. I'm really not. I've never been that person. It's not my personality. I believe that if I help you find the information that you need, you will go ahead and make your own decisions. I'm not here to convince you to buy or not buy. I'm just here to illuminate the crossroads up ahead so that you can move forward with grace. And sometimes that means not buying a property right now is the best thing for you, and sometimes you're gonna be like, I'm ready, let's do this, let's start shopping tomorrow. But I truly do have the philosophy that if it's not a firm yes from you, then it's still a firm no. Back to Sarah, she was originally looking for properties in one particular area, and after going through this workshop and the consultation and helping her articulate what was most important to her and her family, we realized that there was another area that was going to fit her lifestyle better. And lifestyle is what you do. What do you like to do? Where do you like to shop? Where do you and your family like to go spend time when you guys are not at home? What are your hobbies? Where do you like to go eat? We look at all of that and more to get a feel for what kind of buyer you're going to be and how ready are you. Needless to say, Sarah and her family have been super happy where they ended up, and I know that this workshop helped them prepare in making that happen. So even though this wasn't their first purchase, they found a lot of value in our process. And so my commitment to you is that you are going to find the same value. So we're going to get started. The workshop is broken up into 3 parts. I'm going to begin part 1 by tackling and debunking some misconceptions about the negotiation process. Then part 2, we'll walk through the actual negotiation process and what that looks like in our current market. And then we'll finish off with part 3 with a survey of where buyers generally get stuck at during the buying process. Now, the first misconception, and I find that this is a really big one, is that you don't want to show your emotions when you're negotiating. The reality is that this process is just as emotional for the seller as it is for you as a buyer. And a lot of times when I'm on the listing side of the transaction, almost always, especially if the homeowner has been there for a very long time, they will literally say something like, you know, I want to sell this to someone who's going to love this property just as much as I have. And so it's super emotional for both the buyer and the seller. So when we can get everybody on the same page and understand that as a buyer, your commitment is to buying the property. As a seller, your commitment is to selling the property. And if you remember that, that is how we are able to really keep everyone focused to making it to the goal, make everybody happy, and get everybody to the closing table. The next one is, the people around me are great advice givers when it comes to real estate. And hey, I'm definitely not saying anything negative about friends and family or anything like that. But keep in mind that because real estate is number 1, hyperlocal, and number 2, the market changes every couple of years because real estate is cyclical. So that means that the people around you probably haven't bought a property in current market conditions. And in a lot of cases, they haven't bought locally either. And so we have to keep in mind that best practices, contract strategies, the way we negotiate, all of that will vary state by state, region by region, market by market. So taking the advice of the advisor, the agent that you actually hire, is super important. And that's why you need to choose an agent that you trust and who is not just a friend or family or something like that, someone who you know has your best interests in mind and will guide you through this process. That's how you bulletproof yourself from adding unnecessary anxiety to an already complex process. The next one is, home buying is scary. And the reality is, when you understand the process, you realize the steps themselves are actually not that complicated. I always say my first job is to protect your equity, which goes back to the generational wealth building thing that I mentioned before. And my second job is to make sure that we help you manage your emotions during the process. This is one of, if not the biggest transaction of your life. And so when you're educated and you know what to expect at each step of the way, it totally eliminates the fear and the frustration, and then it alleviates the emotional burden. The third misconception is that you have to worry about getting screwed over. Okay, the reality is that the purchase contract that we use here in Florida is written to protect you as a buyer. Back in the day, the contract was just like a term sheet with like 1 or 2 pages, and over time that has evolved into a 13-page contract that we use today, and 95% of what's written on there is written to protect you as the buyer. And so we'll talk more about the 5 different ways that the contract is written in your favor. There's what we call checkpoints or contingencies that allow you out of the contract if something is not right. So with a good understanding of the contracts, the terms, all of that, you'll be fully aware of what you're signing, and we wouldn't have it any other way. The last one is, we should wait for the market to crash. And oh my God, this is so big because, okay, the market has definitely shifted from where we were during the pandemic. Why are interest rates so high? And how does that affect me? And why are prices so high? And why is inventory so low? Okay. All of these questions come up in almost every single real estate conversation that I have. And if you look at Google alone, you look at the search traffic, the phrase, when is the housing market going to crash, is up by like 3,000%. So my objective here is to walk you through where we came from during the pandemic to where we are at now post-pandemic, okay? First thing to know is that a recession does not necessarily equal a housing crisis. There's a misconception that when the market crashed in 2008, that was reflective of a market correction. The reality is that 2008 was truly a housing crisis. In 3 out of the last 5 recessions, housing prices actually increased, not decreased. And so as you can see, 2008 was an anomaly because it was a recession in which prices actually dropped dramatically. Okay, so they call that the Great Recession for a reason. Just like we had the Great Depression in 1929, 2008 was the Great Recession. We're not anticipating those kind of changes again. So we're looking at interest rates to remain between 6 and 6.5% for 2025. And remember, no one has a crystal ball. We can only look at historical trends and make educated guesses. What we know with 100% certainty is that real estate is cyclical. There's a buyer's market and there's a seller's market. And we'll talk more about what today's market is actually doing during our consultation. Over the last couple of years, beginning in 2020, a lot of the demand for housing was an effect of the pandemic, okay? So specifically down here in South Florida, what you saw was that there was a lot of people who wanted to come live here. Before the pandemic, people couldn't just come live here. They couldn't leave their high-paying jobs in states like California and New York because moving here would mean a pay cut, okay? Something like 50%. When the pandemic happened and companies had to go remote, people started moving here in droves, okay? Also, the Floridian economy stayed open during the pandemic. So you saw tons of people trade in their driver's licenses from other states and claim their Florida license. When the Great Migration happened, coupled with mortgage rates in the twos at that time, those people, as well as the local buyers that we had that were waiting on the sidelines, they consumed up all of our inventory so fast. So what happens when inventory is consumed? Well, we got to look for more land to build on, right? So let's look at the geography. I'm going to take you back to geography class. South Florida is a peninsula, and South Florida is constrained between the Everglades to the west, which are wetlands, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east and the south. And so with that in mind, we actually have less than 1% buildable land left. So we don't have anywhere else to build. We can only build up into high-rise condos or up into northern counties. So we can't even fix our low inventory by just building more because there isn't any land left to build on. Anything new that you want to build, you literally have to buy something pre-existing, tear it down, and rebuild. And so that alone insulates the prices of the South Florida real estate market. And so that is the biggest driving factor that keeps our prices so high. Another driver is buyer demand. We know that the average home buying age is between like 33 and 35 years old. Millennials are coming into that age group. So we've started to enter the market in droves. And so a huge generation of buyers is coming into the market right now. That's also driving up demand. When demand is high and supply is low, the prices rise because we don't have enough supply to keep up with demand. So what does come on market is often priced higher to take advantage of the competitive buyers. That's going to lead to bidding wars. That's going to lead to prices being driven up even further. And that creates what we call a seller's market where buyers need to compromise on price just to secure the house. As of January 2025, Broward and Dade counties are still in a seller's market because single-family homes come on market and sell within 6 months or less. However, we are not in an extreme seller's market, okay? We're actually swinging back toward a more balanced market as it relates to single-family homes, okay? Where both sides have equal negotiating power. Condos are in an extreme buyer's market in both counties. Okay, but condos are a different story in South Florida. Right now, South Florida is experiencing a condo crisis, which we can talk about during your consultation or in another video. So I hope that this helps a little bit in terms of understanding what we're expecting as we enter the current market. And as I mentioned, this is covering a lot here. If you want to take a screenshot of the slides, if you want to review this, come back later, review certain sections, you are more than welcome to, okay? All right, so moving right along into affordability. So this is something that we are watching very closely, and we're finding that even though interest rates have gone up, decreasing or eliminating affordability for many buyers, The fact is that affordability doesn't significantly drive prices down, but it will impact the number of properties sold and a buyer's willingness to pay above appraisal. And as a side note, I'm not sure what interest rates are actually going to be doing at the time you're watching this, so we will definitely review interest rates if you haven't already reviewed them with your lender. So this means that while fewer homes may sell due to affordability issues, the prices themselves won't necessarily drop. Sellers will continue to list their homes at high prices because if buyers are unwilling or unable to meet those prices, then that leads to slower sales rather than lower prices, which is exactly what we're seeing in South Florida. With an increase in dollar volume year over year, coupled with an increase in days on market, coupled with a decrease in transactions in both counties. All of this to say, less people can afford to buy, but they're still buying at high prices because they have no other choice. Okay? So let's drive all of these points home now. Let's say you are a buyer, which you are, and let's say you want to keep your monthly mortgage principal and interest payment at $3,000, and let's say it's 1985. When interest rates were a cool 12%, and now in order to keep your monthly payment around $3,000, you would have had to purchase for around $287,000. And so a lot of times when people say like, well, prices have gone up so much, in most cases, people forget to look at the fact that those interest rates were insanely high and that prices were low in order for buyers to actually be able to afford and to keep the market churning. Now, let's hop back on our time machine and go to 2000 when rates were right around 8.25. Since you want to stay under $3,000 a month, you're going to be able to afford a purchase at around $400,000. So that 4% difference in interest made a difference of about $100,000 in buying power. Fast forward to today, and you're looking at 6.5, for example, which by the way, between 6 and 7 have been the historical average in interest rates here. In order to keep your monthly payment under $3,000, you can afford around $475,000. Now, keep in mind, I am not calculating your down payment, which increases your buying power, and I'm not calculating HOA, which decreases it, okay? And so it's important to remember that the price that you're purchasing is not the only important number. The interest rate is equally important because at the end of the day, you're buying a monthly payment. You're not buying the actual purchase price of the house unless you're paying cash for it. So let's recap before we move along to part 2, and just know we'll talk more about this during our consultation. There's actually going to be a link below from this video where I'm going to have our monthly market updates so that way you can click on your month or at least the latest month and review and see the most updated stats for the counties you are going to be shopping in. Okay? To recap, yes, inventory is increasing because it's staying longer on market, but we still don't have enough to keep up with demand. And that shortage is not going to go away because, again, we don't have enough land to continue to build on. Other places like Texas, Arizona, that South Florida's market has historically been compared to, they still have a lot of flat land and farmland that is ripe for building. And so they can keep up with demand because they can just continue to build and build. Prices will remain low. Whereas here, we don't have that luxury because we don't have the land. The other point was that the Great Recession of 2008 was called the Great Recession for a reason, and that's because it's once a century and it's not a reflection of the typical market cycle. We can't expect it to happen again. In summary, prices in South Florida are still expected to increase due to all of the above. So it's better to secure a property now than wait for fluctuations in interest rates or try to, time the market, because we have buyers who have been sitting and waiting and wishing and hoping and doing the rain dances and hoping that prices are going to come down. And as we've seen, they're only going to continue to go up. All right, so we're done with part 1. We've gone through all the misconceptions and covered the market. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit into the second part of our workshop. So I want you to bring out your pen and paper because this is where people have the majority of their questions. Feel free to pause, jot down, take notes, take screenshots, and come back to this video whenever you need. So we're going to dive into the actual negotiation process. Now, this is important to understand because I find that when I have not taken a buyer through this process and we start shopping and making offers, what ends up happening is that there's a divide between them and I because they're not seeing the entire picture. They get focused on the price of property rather than looking at the terms of the offer. And so the objective here is to really walk you through and help you understand all the different ways that an offer is structured so that one, your offer gets accepted, and two, the offer is also going to get you the best deal on the house. And no, they're not mutually exclusive. Both of these things can be true. So throughout this next section, we're going to cover 5 different things that make the best offer. They are 1, timing the purchase, 2, how to find the right property, 3, what to do when you're making an offer and what happens after it gets accepted. 4 is how we protect you from a bad deal or from losing your deposit. And 5 is how to take advantage of that due diligence period in order to move forward confidently. Okay, so number 1 is timing. We're now stepping back into a market where there may be multiple offers on some properties that are priced really well and are in great condition. But for the most part, we're finding that there is going to be some back and forth negotiation that's going to happen after we place the offer. Now, in most cases, the first or second time that you go out to look at property, you are going to find something that you love and you'll want to place an offer on that. And that doesn't mean that you're jumping the gun or that you're missing out on something better, because what that means is that we have taken our time to understand exactly what it is that you wanted. We took the time to prioritize your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, your absolute deal breakers. And we showed you the properties that were the best fit for exactly what you told us that you wanted. So it's 1,000% normal that on the first or second or maybe third property, you're like, wow, this is the one, let's go. Because again, we've done so much of our own due diligence up front that this is completely normal. Now, when property is priced really well and it's in a condition that it can get financed, you will find 100% of the time it will sell quickly. And in most cases, the houses will go into multiple offers. Sometimes we make an offer and we get it accepted in a couple of hours. And in other cases, we're going to find that negotiations can take several days. And as frustrating as it is for me as an agent, I know how frustrating it is for you as a buyer, where you're like hanging on the edge of your seat, hoping and wishing and praying that you get an answer quickly. And all of that is completely normal. Sometimes it just takes them a couple of days to respond. So I can call, text, email, go to their office, send carrier pigeons. Unfortunately, sometimes sellers want to wait the weekend before they accept an offer to see if a better offer comes along. The last conversation around timing is that closing takes 30 days. So let's talk deadlines. I'm going to use a lease as an example. Let's say that your lease is ending on October 15 and you need to leave where you are by that date, okay? We're just gonna use that as an example. So even if you're not renting right now, this timeline will still help you, okay? So check it out. So your lease is ending on October 15, but you would like enough time between closing and moving, like to get settled, hire professional cleaners, paint if you need to paint, change out the carpet if you hate carpet, all that good stuff, okay? So you decide to set your closing date for September 15, so you have 30 days in between September 15 and October 15 to get everything done. Let's say that, I don't know, there's an issue that came up in the transaction where there's like a lien or something, and then you needed a few extra days to sort out things with the lender. So we ended up extending the closing date to October 1st. That still gives you enough time to actually get settled in. So although now we are closing on October 1st, and even if we close on September 15th, your first official mortgage payment isn't actually due until November 1st. Now, this is something that I want you to confirm with your lender, but 99% of the time, unless we decide to structure it differently, interest is calculated a month in arrears. Arrears means in reverse. So unlike rent, where you pay September's rent on September 1st, when you own a property, you can't accrue interest until after the month has already passed. And so with that in mind, if you close on September 15th, you would actually have prepaid interest for September 15th through the 30th as part of your cash to close. And then your very first official mortgage payment wouldn't be due until after a full month has passed on November 1st. So I find that this is super important to remember because a lot of people get nervous about having to pay 2 months of housing at the same time, their last month of rent and their new mortgage. But especially with leases, if you paid your last month's rent up front, you can actually push this process out even further, and you still have enough time to get settled and get moved in because you won't have to pay that last month of rent or the first full month of your mortgage, if that makes sense. Okay, so now that we've figured out our timing, step 0 in the home buying process is to get pre-approved. And I'm not just saying like go to Rocket Mortgage or go to Bank of America and just like fill out a form and they're like, okay, you're pre-qualified, you're pre-approved. That is not going to work. And there are several reasons for that. And the main one being specifically with those two that I mentioned, they have an infamous track record of giving buyers rough pre-approvals where they haven't actually even done any underwriting. So they have no idea what your finances actually look like. And they have a reputation for 3 days before closing saying, oh, by the way, we can't actually finance this. And so yeah, no, it ends up being super frustrating for you as a buyer, and equally important, it actually makes it really hard to get an offer accepted when you go with these fast online lenders or commercial banks because they have such a bad reputation in the industry already. And you have to remember that when getting an offer accepted, the seller is going to pick the offer that is most likely to get to closing without any surprises down the road, okay? So in terms of getting pre-approved, I cannot stress enough how important it is to, one, go with a lender that is a mortgage broker, not a bank. Mortgage brokers have access to multiple loan options and they can get you competitive rates and assistance programs and really tailor the loan product to your specific needs, okay? On the opposite hand, a bank, regardless of if you have an account with them or not, they can only loan on their mortgage products, which means less flexibility, less competitiveness, and because the mortgage side of a big commercial bank or credit union is such a small part of their business, they don't put enough resources behind it to actually prioritize getting your transaction closed. Not to mention that most lenders are salaried, and so they're not motivated to get you to closing because they don't care. It doesn't depend on them. Number 2 is sit down with at least 3 mortgage brokers so you have a second and a third opinion about your interest rate and loan options, and then you can confidently pick and choose the one that's best for you. They will need to pull credit, okay, to get you a real rate, but you do have 45 days to shop for a loan where it will only still count as one hard inquiry. Another issue with working directly with a bank is that they work bank hours and at 5 o'clock, they stop answering their phone. So let's say it's Saturday morning and we went out to see a few properties and you find the one and you decide that you want to put an offer on that property immediately. So you call the bank only to realize that you can't get in touch with them because they're closed. Okay, so now we have to wait until Monday to even get an updated pre-approval letter, not to mention get updated numbers on our mortgage estimate to see if that house is even an option before we place an offer. So are you seeing the horror story with banks here? Good. So I cannot stress enough going with a mortgage broker, making sure that when they request documents that they need, that you're sending them over as quickly as possible so we can get you truly pre-approved before we start shopping and be able to close on time once we are under contract. Because if we can eliminate the stress of having to collect and send those documents after we're under contract, then we can focus on you, on your house, on getting you into your home, rather than on going through the chaos of trying to get reapproved by multiple lenders after the fact, and then everybody's having a crisis. Another really important aspect of financing is that the majority of associations, okay, they have their own requirements on the type of financing and credit scores and their own down payment requirements. This will apply especially if you're looking to purchase condos, townhomes, or single-family homes that are inside homeowners associations. So you want to make sure that you are truly pre-approved, because otherwise what will happen is we'll go look at property, you'll fall in love, place an offer, only to realize after that you don't actually qualify to purchase in that association. And so that is going to be the biggest heartbreak that you're going to experience in this process. If this happens, we will have to go back to the drawing board, which makes for a lot of extra frustration for no reason, when we could have known up front what and where we can buy or can't buy. So I hope that's helpful. Now I have a little fun question for you. And the question is, If you were to go to the doctor's office with a headache and they were like, yep, all right, brain surgery on the table right now, and they start pulling out like the chainsaw, and they're, hooking you up to the machines, like how would you feel about that? Like, you'll probably be like, what? No, wait, no, hold on a second. Can you like look at my head? Like, can you scan me? Can you ask me some questions? Like, where does it hurt? Is it here? Is it there? Can you run some tests before you open me up? Well, that is the equivalent of what agents do and what buyers can expect when they start shopping for property without the proper needs analysis. You should never just say, okay, I just want to buy a 4-bed, 3-bath, single-family home in this price point in this city, because if that was the case, you'll just buy the very first one that you see. But I'm willing to bet that there's so much more that's important to you than just the number of beds and baths. So we want to make sure that the lifestyle in that home makes sense for you. We want to make sure that the school zones, or even if you're like, I don't want to have kids, I don't have kids, don't put me in a school zone, like, those are the things that are important for us to know so that we can really filter through what's available on the market. And also, one of the things that we do for our clients is if there's nothing available in a particular neighborhood that you're in love with and you really want to be in there, we actually take a proactive approach and we start mailing to the neighborhood to find you an off-market property and potentially help you get into that community in that way. But we can't do any of that until 1, you get pre-approved, and 2, we get your intake form, and 3, we do our consultation so that we can really zero in on exactly what it is that you're looking for, okay? So some people are like, hey, Janet, just take me to go see houses. And listen, I promise by doing it this way, getting pre-approved, completing your intake form, doing your consultation is how we are able to give you an extraordinary real estate experience. And if we don't do the steps in that order, you'll find a lot of constant miscommunication come up later in the transaction, a lot of things that could have been ironed out on the front end simply by going through our process. So I started surveying a bunch of listing agents and I started asking them, what makes you want to accept an offer? A lot of the answers harped on the support team around you. So for example, Janelle said, having a quality buyer's agent and having a great lender. April said having an agent who builds relationships with them. TJ Blair said, they actually both agreed, and they said having an agent who's not afraid to pick up the phone and call the listing agent like, hey, I have a buyer who's super interested in this property. They love it. They're a family of however many people. This is their situation. Like, what do we need to do to get this offer accepted? That alone goes such a long way, and rest assured, I always call on all of my offers before submitting because I want our offer to get accepted out of the gate. Okay? Now let's talk about finding the deals, okay? The first thing we need to address are the portal sites. So I'm gonna talk about Zillow, I'm gonna talk about Realtor, I'm gonna talk about Redfin, anything that's not the MLS. Now, they're great for preliminary searches, exploring inventory before you have an agent, so on and so forth. The challenge you're gonna find with these is that anytime you create an account on there, you inquire about a property, 99 out of 100 times, you're not even talking to the listing agent, you're just talking to an agent who was willing to spend the most money to acquire your information. And so it ends up being super frustrating for you, more than it actually needs to be. Another issue is they have inaccurate data, and this actually serves the platform at a really high level because a lot of times people will say, well, Zillow has the most properties and more properties on the MLS. And the reality is that when a property comes off the market or it goes under contract, Zillow will often take longer to update the status because they want to generate lead traffic for as long as possible. And they only can do that if a property stays available on the website, even though in real life, it's no longer available. That's what they all do. Do they have integrity for keeping you coming back for inaccurate information? Absolutely not. Okay. The other thing is that they're limited on their search functionality. So by all means, if you're like, hey, I just want to like kind of see what's out there, have some fun, shop around, go ahead. But do not rely on them as your primary source of home data. These sites make money off your information because they have to sell it to the highest bidding agent to survive. On the opposite hand, we have our handy dandy MLS, and there is so much search customization that you can do there. Your information is private, so only you and your agent see your information, and you can actually communicate about certain properties through the MLS. You can ask for showings and get up to the minute updates on the MLS. The one thing I do want to say about the MLS is, unfortunately, there is going to be some small margin of error in input of the data, in the sense that a lot of times listing agents will not put in all the small details of the listings in the correct places. So for example, they may see, if it's a condo association, they may not put condo, they may just put association. So there are certain things that will make it really hard to filter for. Same thing is true for like in-unit washer and dryer. Not every agent is going to fill out that particular field. And so when you try to narrow in on that, you end up excluding a lot of properties. In some cases, and we'll talk about this as we set up your search, we're actually going to leave out some of the details of your criteria in order to make sure that the properties that are viable options for you are still going to show up on your search, regardless of whether the details were entered correctly on the MLS or not. So I hope that makes sense. Now, besides the portals and the MLS, we're going to talk about some of the places where you may also want to go look at some properties. And I'm not telling you not to do this at all. I'm just saying proceed with some caution. So first one is open houses. And by all means, if you're driving around on the weekend and you want to stop by an open house, go on in. There is nothing wrong with that. They will, however, ask you to sign in because they want to capture your information. And my suggestion is that you actually sign in with your agent's info. So let's say that we do decide to work together. When you sign in, you would put down Janet Garcia-Realtor, my name, my email address, my phone number. And that way they don't have to add your information to their campaigns, and you gracefully bow out of their campaign so that they don't email you, text you, and call you for the rest of your life. So that is my suggestion there. The next one is for sale by owners. Okay, so keep in mind that for sale by owners specifically list their properties themselves because they are trying to squeeze every dollar that they can out of that sale. So in most cases, you're gonna find that number one, they're overpriced because they refuse to hire an agent that would have come in and educate them about the value of their home. And number two, there's a misconception that because they aren't represented, that they'll be easy to work with and that you'll get a great deal. And the reality is the opposite. They are the hardest people to negotiate with in many cases because they have zero guidance, they have no reference points, and they have no idea how this process is supposed to work. And so it ends up getting really messy really quickly with them because it's more frustrating for you as a buyer to work with someone that doesn't know what they're doing essentially. And so by all means, if it's something that you would like to pursue, we can definitely do that. We just have to go in there knowing that there will be a few more bumps on that road. The last caution that I want to give relates to new construction homes. So here in South Florida, we have mostly new construction. So there's not a ton of pre-construction or custom builds unless you start getting up into the luxury price points. Pre-construction is when a developer bought up a golf course, for example, and they buy up the golf course and they go, okay, well, we're going to subdivide the land. There's going to be 8 floor plans and the buyer can pick from these 6 finish types. With these, you wouldn't be able to move in immediately because they have yet to build the home. Now, new construction is when the homes have already been built and you get to pick the model you like from available inventory that's turnkey, and these you can move in immediately, obviously. In both cases, you'll know you're in a construction site when you see fencing and construction equipment and maybe like a dirt road somewhere. You'll see signage, you'll see model homes, you'll see a sales office. When you're driving around and you see those, you cannot walk in there without calling your agent first. If you go into the sales office and you give your information without having your agent with you or without at least having your agent pre-register you, the builder will then not allow your agent to be part of that transaction. And so in most cases, and especially when you're unrepresented, you're going to find that builders are not willing to bend on their price because they need the prices to stay high enough to support their appraisal values. However, they'll add value in other ways, but you do have to know how to negotiate this. This can show up in things like picking a better lot for the same price or getting them to cover a year or 2 of the association fees, things along those lines. So before you step foot into a sales office, make sure that you have your agent schedule your new or pre-construction showings for you, or better yet, that we go in there with you. And that way we make sure we get you the best deal possible there. Okay, so Imagine we're out on our first round of showings. These are the things that you should be looking out for at each property. Number one, how do you feel about the floor plan? I was actually just scrolling through one of our agent Facebook groups today, and somebody posted a floor plan where it made absolutely no sense. It was like you had to walk through each of the rooms to get to any of the other rooms, and every bedroom was connected to every other room, and then there was a hallway on the side. It was very odd. And so walk in and check, does the floor plan work for you? Is it open? Is it closed? Will it flow with your lifestyle? The next one is there room to grow? So this particularly shows up in my Miami buyers where they're like, you know what, one bedroom will be fine. And the reality is that these are the same buyers that call me back a year later and are like, let's sell it. We need more space. We had a baby. I don't know where to put my guests. I started dating somebody and now we're bursting at the seams. So I'm not saying step outside of your budget. What I'm saying is make sure there's enough space in the property that you can continue to grow into it. Okay, that sort of leads me into this third point. Is there enough storage? This one's a big one. It's always overlooked, and especially as you look at some of the newer properties, you're gonna find that they have these huge, beautiful open concepts, and yet they don't have closet space. And so you either have to factor in that you're gonna need to buy storage like armoires or sheds, or the house just needs to have enough storage space, okay? So don't let that one slip away. The next one is, how is the neighborhood? I always tell people, just stand outside. Do you feel safe? Do you like the way the neighborhood looks? Are you comfortable? Is there enough parking space? Is there guest parking? Like all of those things are things that you want to be looking at when you're in the neighborhood. And then number 5 is, was it priced right? Or can we get it for the right price? A lot of times buyers will focus on the outdated carpet, the awful paint color, and those are things that can be quite inexpensively changed. Those are easy and affordable fixes. The 5 things that we just talked about though, those are some of the things that are super hard to change. How do you change a floor plan? The only way you do that is if there's no load-bearing walls, and then you still have to have a contractor come in and do all of that. So finding more room in the property is very hard to do, especially if you're already organized. Like there's only so much reorganizing that you can do before you realize you just don't have the space. You obviously can't change where the property is located as well. And one more thing I wanted to mention about location. What about the direction the front of the property is facing? So for example, right now I have a buyer that likes to spend time outside in his backyard. He likes to grill, he likes to entertain, all of the good stuff. And he was between 2 homes in the same neighborhood that he wanted, where one was more expensive than the other one. But because outdoor living was such a huge priority for him, we looked at where the sun actually rose and set in the yard, the amount of direct sunlight, the view from the yard, the amount of privacy. Due to the direction that the homes were facing, the palm trees in the backyard of the homes that we were looking at provided certain amount of shade where you could be outside in the hot summer day and still enjoy your home without the sun directly hitting you and your guests, and then you need to go reapply sunblock every half an hour just to grill yourself a steak. And so we ended up using this approach to make a decision on which home to buy. So these things are the things that we get to think about as well. And that's part of the reason why we like to do our intake form, our consultation. Really, it's for us to be able to catch the subtleties that are going to make the difference between what's more important to you and what's not. Okay, so now let's say after all this shopping, we finally find you the one and you love it and you're like, okay, let's jump on this and let's make an offer. And then we learned that there's multiple offers. Now, there are ways to win without having to be the best price. And so I'm gonna recommend that you take a screenshot of this. It's something that we'll talk about during your consultation. And please note, not every price point, not every city, not everywhere are we experiencing multiple offers, okay? So there are a lot of terms that can be negotiated to get your offer accepted. You just have to be aggressive about them. So congratulations, your offer was accepted and you are now officially under contract. The next thing we are going to cover is the due diligence period, or what I like to call our inspection period. What we're looking for is material defects. So understanding the difference between wear and tear versus material defects is going to be super, super important here. When we talk about material defects, we're looking for issues with the roof, the HVAC system, plumbing, electrical, structural integrity, or mold and termite issues. Those are the big ticket items that will affect the value of the property. And the fact that there's like a cracked tile or the house needs paint or the faucet diverter doesn't stay up, these are things that 99% of the time the seller is not going to give you a credit for, because these are wear and tear issues that you'll find in any resale property. However, if you're looking at issues with those big ticket items, those are the ones that will affect your ability to even get insurance. So we want to make sure, and that's going to affect our financing. So we want to make sure we get credits for these during our due diligence period so that we can close on the house. And I'm personally a big fan of getting credits over having the seller do repairs, because in most cases, when the repairs are done by the seller, sellers are on their way out. So they'll do the repairs with as little effort as possible, as little money put in as possible. So we'll just ask for the credits so that we can hire the correct professionals to do the job right. By the way, when you work with the inspectors that we recommend, you also get built-in warranties as a result of that. So you are more than welcome to use whatever inspector it is that you want. I just strongly recommend that whoever it is that you do choose, that they're backed up by warranties, because things break, things are missed, and it ends up being an issue later on. So we asked listing agents, when it comes to the inspection terms, what motivates sellers to accept an offer? And we got feedback like having a short due diligence period, making sure that we're limiting the repair credit that we're asking for, focusing on the big ticket items rather than nitpicking about every little detail. Got it? Okay, so we passed inspection and now we're waiting for the bank's appraisal of the property. So the objective of the bank running an appraisal on a property is to determine an unbiased value of the property. Not you as the buyer or me as the agent, the seller or the listing agent. None of us have a say in who the appraiser is or in the value that they come back with, okay? The bank is the one that hires the appraiser, and so the appraiser answers to them. So now let's say, for example, we're under contract for $500,000, and that $500,000 figure is the contract price. The appraised value is the figure that the appraiser will come back with in terms of the value of the house. These two figures, contract price, appraised value, they are not always the same number. And the thing is, you're actually bound to both. So watch this, watch what happens here. And rewatch this part if you need to down the road. The appraised value can be higher, the same, or lower than the contract price. If the property's value is higher than the contract price, for example, if the appraisal came back at $520, but our contract price is $500, that means you're buying something for $20,000 less than its marketable value. That's $20,000 in instant equity and you still get to buy the home for $500,000, so that's an instant win for you. If the property appraises at $500, nothing happens, contract price is the same as appraisal price, we move forward with the transaction like nothing happened. Now here's where things get tricky. If, for example, the property appraises at $480, but you're under contract for $500, that means the appraised value of the property is lower than contract price. From the bank's perspective, the house is only worth $480, not $500, and they will only lend up to appraised market value, which means the bank will only lend $480, but the seller expects $500, so you're missing $20,000 to be able to perform on the contract. Every dollar that you spend on the property above appraised value is going to have to come from your pocket in cash. So this is where some renegotiation needs to happen. At this point, one of three things can happen. In our market, the most common is that we renegotiate the contract price. But if we can't come to terms with the seller, the second option is actually just canceling the contract. You walk away with your deposit, and then we have to start fresh somewhere else. The third option is we can pay the difference that's missing. This is viable only if you absolutely need to buy this house and if you have the cash for it, okay? So as you can see, there are many terms that are in constant negotiation until after appraised value comes in and we lock in the contract price, which is usually after about 2 weeks under contract, okay? So let's say you survive the appraisal. Now we just need to wait for the clear to close from the lender. During the last 2 weeks before closing day, the lender is diligently fulfilling the last minute requirements that it needs in order to furnish the loan. Two of those requirements is property insurance and title insurance. So you're going to be hearing from these providers from time to time during that time period for any last minute information they're gonna need from you. Once the lender has cleared all conditions, they'll approve the loan and they'll send out an email with a clear to close, which is just a notice that the loan has been approved and it's ready to fund. And at that point, you'll sign their closing disclosure, which states all the final loan terms. And what we'll do is we'll do a final walkthrough of the property and make sure the property is in the same condition that it was during the initial inspection. You'll then wire your cash to close to the title company. And finally, on closing day, we'll all go to the title company together. You'll sign all of your documents, and that's usually done quite quickly. And then we'll just make sure that you do bring your ID, wire confirmation, and HOA approval letter if it is applicable to you, okay? So I just want you to pause, take a deep breath, hold it, and release. That was a lot of information. We've debunked a bunch of buying misconceptions, and we've reviewed the current state of the market. We re-educated ourselves on the actual negotiation process, and now we're going to wrap up this workshop by shining a light at some of the places where buyers get stuck at this point in the process. So stay tuned. Now I know you are excited and nervous all at the same time, okay? So let me know during our consultation at which one of these, if any, you feel stuck at, okay? You're ready? Okay. So this is a big one. I should wait one more year because I just don't feel ready. And here's my recommendation is that we sit down, we have our consultation where we can at least get started with helping you put together a game plan, because a lot of times when people say, I just want to wait another year, it's simply because they don't have enough information to make a confident decision. And so we're being paralyzed by fear of not knowing what comes next. That fear will cost you about a 6% appreciation and some tax benefits over the next year. Or are you stuck at, I'm just going to wait until the market crashes? And as I mentioned before, we've seen buyers who have been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Remember, we really want to focus on market indicators at a local level and not just at a national level. We want to look at what's going on in our specific area. What's the supply and demand of that specific area, and how's that looking? That will answer the age-old question of whether or not your market is going to crash. The other one is, I'm going to go with the first realtor that I can think of. And as we've talked about, choosing the right agent is super important in making a great decision. This is going to be someone who's helping you make life-altering decisions during your transaction. So you need to choose wisely, okay? The next one is, I don't know if I have enough money saved up, or I'm just going to keep saving because I just don't know how much I actually need. And if that's what's happening, this is a pre-approval problem. And we need to connect it with a trustworthy lender that can walk you through the math. We need to get you set up on a few mortgage consultations immediately, because the sooner you know where you stand financially, the sooner you can take action toward working on whatever is missing. Maybe you think it's credit. That's not good enough. Maybe it's your debt to income ratio. Maybe it's really your work and income history. And the whole time you thought it was something else, further elongating the process. So let's work with a lender that can prepare you on all areas: savings, credit, debt, income, and that can give you a solid yes or no answer. And if not, a solid plan of action toward a pre-approval. And keep in mind that a lender cannot sell you anything until you have a house that you actually want to buy. So until then, they are entirely just a mortgage consultant that will help you qualify for this big purchase. Or are you the buyer that thinks, I'm just going to hold off because I don't feel like I'm ready and I just don't know where to start? I had a mentor that used to say, you'll never be ready, but you can always be prepared. Because the reality is, if you don't prepare yourself, it won't matter if or when you are ready to buy anyway. And that robs you of your options. It robs you of your freedom to say, I will or won't buy this year. My team and I really invest a lot of time and energy in making sure that you are so fully comfortable and confident in the preparation process that you know exactly what to expect and what to do at every turn. And last but not least, and most importantly, are you stuck at, I don't know why I should buy? And this is the most important question to ask yourself before you do anything. The reason why you want to buy needs to be clear to you from the start, because when things get rough, and they will, your why is going to give you the strength to carry you through this process. And It will help you stay the course. Is it to build wealth? Is it for fun? Is this a vacation home for your family? Is it to plan for your future retirement? Like, why is that important? Is this to leave a legacy for your family? Do you have to buy a home as soon as possible? I'm going to be sending you a Google Drive folder where you'll be able to organize all buying a home documents as a token of our commitment to making this process seamless for you. And in there, you're going to find a document titled My Why, which is where you can sit down and jot down all of your ideas on why you want to buy a home. And you're also going to find other resources that I've mentioned in this workshop. We'll actually utilize this folder as our central organizing hub for all of our shared documents during our work together. So our objective today was for you to feel confident negotiating the best deal on a property without having to give up your firstborn child or your left arm. Now, if we did that for you, let me know during our consultation or in the comments below. So right now you might be feeling like, you know what? I can't do this, Janet. Like, let's go, let's get started. Or maybe you're like, oh crap, like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into, or feeling like, okay, we're just gonna take a pause and I just have to think about this for a little bit more because that kind of like butterfly feeling in your stomach just won't go away and it's making you uneasy. And that's exactly why I'm here as your professional real estate broker. My job is to give you the map, the boots, the gear, the armor, and to walk down this path with you while we hold your hand and get you to the other side. The only thing you need to bring is your faith, your trust, and your willingness to walk with us, and we will get you there. So as we close out, I just want to invite you to take a quick second to close your eyes. I want you to think about that moment when you've gone through all of this and you are now on your way to collect those keys at the closing table. And then you drive to your property and you open the door to your new home. Like, what will that do for you? Will it bring your family closer? Will it help you be closer to work, to enjoy where you live? Will it make you proud, to host, to entertain more? Is it giving your dog a backyard, your kids? What will buying a property do for you? And if you're ready to step into that dream, just know that my team and I are here for you, and you can open your eyes. So here's an overview of what you'll get when you hire my team and I to work with you on your home purchase. The first thing is that you get our home buying blueprint, which you'll find in the Google Drive folder. This is a PDF document that walks you through the entire process from beginning to end, and you can follow along as we move through each step in the process during the transaction. And I find that between the workshop and the home buying blueprint, my buyers never feel that 2 a.m. anxiety of like, oh my God, what are we doing? Are we making the right decision? Because all that goes away when you work with us. The next one is the home warranties. Like I mentioned before, when you work with the inspectors that we recommend, you get over $20,000 of home warranties in case something goes wrong or something was missed in the inspection, your AC, your refrigerator breaks after closing, you will be covered. We also put together a money playbook, which is a guide that will walk you through everything that you need to know about getting your finances ready. So we found that this was a great starting point for our buyers that were not financially prepared today, but want to know how to get ready. Okay, that's there for you. And you also get our vendor list. So I've spent the last 4 years networking and building relationships to make sure that we find you the best vendors in everything from roofing down to a personal organizer to the best accountant to pretty much everything in between. We do have our clients sign what we call our VIP agreement. It's our written commitment to you that shows you everything we're going to do for you in exchange for your loyalty to us. There's no cost associated with our agreement. We get paid by the seller only upon successfully closing a transaction. And we've never had anybody do this, but if you ever do need to part ways, we just need a notice in writing. And all we ask in exchange is, number one, that you take our advice. And so like when we say, hey, go get pre-qualified before you start shopping, that you'll actually go and do that. Number two is that you don't go cheating on us with another agent, because if we are going to invest as much time, energy, resources, and pour into you as our client, we ask you to commit to working with us exclusively. So now that we've gone through this entire experience together, I hope that you're feeling a little bit more clarity in terms of next steps. The first thing is to book your consultation if you haven't already done so. You're going to see a link for that down below. And second is to please fill out the buyer intake form. If you have not done so already as well, go ahead and do that. Make sure that the intake form is complete before the consultation, because that's really what we use to zero in on exactly what you need, and we can go deeper into your personalized plan of action, okay? And then make sure that you do attend the consultation, of course. If there's any other decision makers that you want to bring with you into this process, even if they're not directly buying, or maybe they are family members or someone who's putting a portion of the down payment in there with you, go ahead and include them in this experience, because it will help everybody get and stay on the same page, and it's going to eliminate a lot of friction between you and them later on in the process, because they didn't go through all the preparation that you did, okay? So after your consultation, we then set up your property search, and we'll figure out during your consultation your shopping timeline and availability, and we'll take it away from there. And I do have a team of assistants and transaction specialists ready to support you in making this the best real estate experience you will ever have. All right. So with that, I hope that you have enjoyed this workshop. We spent a lot of time covering a lot of information, and I know that I talk fast, so I apologize if you had to slow it down a little bit, but I hope that this was massively valuable for you and your family. If you have any questions, I'm going to drop down a question box below. Feel free to call me, text me, email me. My team and I are here for you, whatever you need to feel really confident about this decision, or if there's anything that I can do for you in the meantime, please let us know. I look forward to seeing you at your consultation. Bye for now.